This is the Dean of Travel, Dean Jacobs, coming to you from Africa as I continue my journey through Sudan. Now, the first time I ever tried to enter Sudan was back in 2002, when they refused me entry based on the fact that I had an Israeli stamp in my passport. You see, Sudan does not recognize Israel, and penalizes anyone who does by denying them entry into the country. Now I have a new passport, and plenty of blank pages for them to look through. Sudan, the largest country in Africa, gained independence from England in 1956, and ever since then has found itself embattled in civil conflicts of various types. Roughly a quarter the size of the United States, one could take months exploring the country. I had 2 weeks. So timing my entrance into Sudan had to be perfect. My transit visa was good for 2 weeks, and the ferry going from northern Sudan to Egypt left once a week on Wednesdays. Now, I knew little about Sudan before entering, except for what has been learned recently about the peace process in the south, the crisis in Darfur, and that in 1998, President Clinton once directed an airstrike on the factory that was suspected of producing biological weapons for terrorists. So on a Wednesday morning, I crossed the border into Sudan to see what was waiting to be discovered. Walking into the Sudanese immigration office, the officer in charge asked, "Well, where are you from?" "America," I replied. He stops what he's doing and he looks up. He flashes a huge smile and says, "I love America," followed by, "Can you help me get there? Life is not so good here, but in America there is a chance for a good life." I smile. So after lots of stamping papers and other formalities, he hands back my passport and says, "I extended your transit visa for 1 month. You can go anywhere but Darfur. Welcome to Sudan." Now, my first night in Sudan is spent in the town of Gedaref. And as I sat on a dimly lit street filled with activities, I answered endless questions from locals. Can you criticize your government in public without fear of being in prison? Are there any blacks in America? Can you walk down the street holding the hand of a woman? Slowly I would answer each question, never shying away from the fact that I was from the United States. The next day I went straight to Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. The city has an interesting mix of old and new, making for an interesting place to explore for a few days with its busy streets and roadside shopping. "Consider yourself among your family," says a Sufi follower. A Sufi is a mystic branch of Islam. He goes on to say, "Our religious leaders here instruct us to respect everybody. They instruct us not to discriminate against others, but to share the love of God with everyone. I hope in the near future we are united against poverty. You see, poverty is the common enemy for all mankind, no matter what your religious beliefs may be," he says. I smile and I thank him for sharing his thoughts as he prepares for the Friday evening ritual. About 2 hours before sunset, a circle starts to form outside the tomb of Hamad al-Nil as members of the sect begin singing and chanting. The ritual starts with a procession to the tomb. Then they double back into the circle to take off their shoes and begin dancing. Now, I'm told the circle's holy ground, and thus no shoes are allowed. Women are not allowed into the circle, so they watch and they sing from the sides. This goes on for about 1.5 hours, with people singing and chanting songs. All the while, the Sufis dance in their prayer. Then unexpectedly, someone invites me into the circle, so I slip off my shoes and share in the sweet and sacred moments of the Sufis. It is a very dignified, solemn, deep and joyous experience. It is a serious path for those who follow the ways of being a Sufi. The singing and the dancing continues until the sun sets and prayers begin. And one of the reasons I wanted to come to Khartoum was to see the Nile River. It is in the heart of Khartoum where the Blue Nile, which starts in Ethiopia, meets the White Nile that starts in Uganda. And having been to the headwaters of each, I was excited to see where they meet. Now if you look at this photo, you can see the exact point. The calm waters of the White Nile on the left, and the more turbulent waters of the Blue on the right, as it brings the rainy season water from Ethiopia. Now 80% of the Nile's water comes from the Blue Nile. Another great thing about following the Nile is all the good fish that there is to eat. I'm back in my hotel room for another hot night. Each evening before going to bed, I would dampen my green sarong that you see laying there on my bed and use it to keep me cool long enough to fall asleep in the 100+ degree heat. Walking along the streets of Khartoum, I would visit with people and listen to their stories, like Mohammed here, who once was a meteorologist, but was sacked when the new government took over. And then one morning I decided to head out across Khartoum to explore the market of Omdurman. I figured wandering the endless alleys and side streets of the stalls and shops would offer a little insight into Sudan. And as I walked down the narrow streets, I would take a deep breath and smell the air of the spices and teas and the busyness of daily life. Everywhere I walk, I hear the words, "Welcome," blurted out from the shop windows and the doorways. And at the insistence of a group of men, I join them for a cup of tea. We talk about America, Iraq, Bush, marriage, and Nebraska, and all the things that they're always curious about, like what religion am I? This conversation repeats itself many times and with many different people as I explore the market. And of course, it is always accompanied by tea. So after several hours of exploring, I finally decide it's time to set off for home. And as I walk down the street, a police pickup pulls up and starts chasing 3 men standing across the street. One of the men jumps into an opening for a sewer and escapes. The other 2 are grabbed and thrown into the back of the pickup. As this scene develops, I covertly press the trigger of my camera as it hangs on my side, attempting to capture some images of the brutality unfolding before me without being caught. And I keep walking. And then all of a sudden the police pickup immediately pulls up next to me and waves me over. Jeez, I think to myself, why did I take those photos? As my stomach starts to tighten up, the policeman points to my camera and says, "Why do you have a camera?" "Well, I'm a tourist," I say, again smiling, and then just walk away. Thankfully, they just drove off. I had been warned by local people not to mess with the police. They have total power and no accountability. After a few days, I decide it's time to leave Khartoum. This is Dean Jacobs reminding you to check your compass, because you never know where you might go with the Dean of Travel.